Some people think SUVs started in the 80s when boxy family haulers began filling suburban driveways. Wrong. The truth is, rugged, go-anywhere machines were prowling dirt roads and climbing mountains decades before most of us were born. And the early ones? They weren't just practical, they were downright wild in design and spirit. So, which ones paved the way for the modern SUV without you even knowing it? Let's hit the dusty trail and find out. 1946 Willys Jeep station wagon. Picture this. World War II is over, soldiers are home, and America's factories are finally turning out products that don't involve camouflage. Jeep, fresh off its war hero status, decides to do something crazy, build a civilian vehicle that still has mud in its veins. That's how the 1946 Willys Jeep station wagon rolled into history. This wasn't just a stretched Jeep with a hard top. It was one of the first all-steel station wagons designed for the masses, long before SUVs were a thing. No wooden panels to rot, no frilly chrome for show, just tough sheet metal, a flat grille, and a stance that dared you to find a dirt road. Under the hood, you got the Go Devil 134 cubic inch four-cylinder engine. It made 63 horsepower, laughable by today's standards, but it could crawl up rutted trails without breaking a sweat. This thing wasn't meant to race. It was meant to survive. Inside, you got a simple bench seat, a metal dashboard, and plenty of room for gear, groceries, or hunting dogs. The Willys Jeep station wagon quickly became a hit with farmers, tradesmen, and adventurous families. By the early 50s, you could even get four-wheel drive, making it one of the earliest civilian vehicles that could handle snow, sand, or mud without complaint. Today, most people don't realize they're looking at the grandparent of the SUV when they see one in a museum or an old photo. Without this boxy, rugged wagon proving people wanted style with utility, the SUV boom might never have happened. The Willys Jeep station wagon didn't just transport people, it transported an idea into the mainstream. 1948 Land Rover Series Y. Before Land Rover became a luxury badge for city commuters, it was literally built to be hosed out with a garden sprayer. The 1948 Land Rover series, I wasn't just an SUV, it was a farm tool on wheels. The story starts with a British engineer named Maurice Wilkes, who sketched the design in the sand on a beach. Inspired by the wartime Jeep, but needing something homegrown, he created a boxy, no-nonsense vehicle that could plow fields during the week and haul the family to market on Saturday. The body was made from aluminum because post-war Britain had plenty of aircraft metal lying around, but not much steel. That gave it a strange advantage. It didn't rust like its competitors. Under the hood was a 1.6-liter four-cylinder petrol engine paired with four-wheel drive, making it unstoppable in rough terrain. The series. I wasn't flashy. In fact, you could order it in just a few colors, basically shades of green. The interior was as basic as they come, with flat seats, no carpeting, and controls that felt like tractor levers. But that was the point. This was a vehicle you could literally wash out after a day in the fields. Over time, the Series I became the go-to for farmers, explorers, and even the military. It was reliable, rugged, and shockingly versatile. You could attach power takeoffs to run machinery or convert it into an ambulance. Ask any Land Rover purist today, and they'll tell you this little aluminum box is where the legend began. Without the Series I proving there was a market for civilian 4x4s, the company might never have survived. It wasn't just old-school cool, it was the seed that grew into a global icon. 1951 Toyota Land Cruiser BJ. You think of the Toyota Land Cruiser as a plush off-roader today, but in 1951, it was about as glamorous as a sledgehammer. This was the Land Cruiser BJ, Toyota's first serious attempt at building something that could survive anything. The BJ wasn't born from a marketing plan. It was built to tackle a challenge. Japan's National Police Agency wanted a rugged patrol vehicle, so Toyota created a truck that could climb Mount Fuji without breaking down. And yes, in 1951, one actually did. That stunt gave it instant legend status. It had a 3.4-liter straight-six engine pushing out 85 horsepower, which was more than enough for the slow, steady climb through mud, snow, and volcanic rock. Four-wheel drive came standard, along with a body so simple it looked like it was designed with a ruler and a pencil. The BJ was big, heavy, and not exactly comfortable, but it was indestructible. Over the years, Toyota refined it into the Land Cruiser we know today, but those early models were pure utility, no chrome, no nonsense, just steel, rubber, and stubborn determination. Most people don't realize the BJ came before the iconic FJ40. That makes it not just one of the oldest SUVs most folks never heard of, but also one of the most important in shaping off-road culture. It proved Toyota could build a world-class 4x4 before most of the world even knew Japan was in the game. 1951 Chevrolet Carryall Suburban, advanced design. The name Suburban gets thrown around so much today that people forget it's one of the oldest SUV names in the world. The 1951 Chevrolet Carryall Suburban was part of the advanced design era and looked like a truck that swallowed a bus. This was long before SUV was a term. Back then, it was called a carryall because it could literally carry all. You had 3 rows of seats, a tall roof, and enough space to haul kids, luggage, and maybe a goat if needed. Farmers loved it, church groups loved it, and construction crews loved it. Under the hood was a 216 cubic inch straight 6 engine making around 92 horsepower. Not exactly quick, but it would run forever if you treated it halfway decent. 4-wheel drive wasn't standard yet, but you could get conversions through aftermarket suppliers, making it even more versatile. The design was pure 50s Americana, rounded fenders, big chrome grille, and a friendly, almost cartoonish face. Inside, comfort was minimal, vinyl seats, rubber mats, and steel everywhere, but durability was the selling point. Chevrolet kept the Suburban name alive for decades, evolving it into the modern SUV we see today. But that 1951 model, that's the one that set the template. It was the family truckster, the work van, and the road trip hero all rolled into one big steel box. 1953 International Harvester Travelall. If the Suburban was Chevrolet's people hauler, the International Harvester Travelall was the farm kid who could also take you to the county fair in style. Launched in 1953, it was International Harvester's answer to the growing demand for vehicles that could haul a crowd and gear without sacrificing toughness. International Harvester wasn't some trendy car company. They built tractors, combines, and trucks that worked for a living. The Travelall carried that same DNA. It had a massive front end, boxy body, and the kind of stance that made you think it could pull a barn off its foundation. Under the hood, you got a choice of straight 6 or V8 engines, all tuned for torque over speed. 4-wheel drive was available, making it perfect for rural areas where paved roads were a luxury. The interior was basic but roomy, with bench seats and enough cargo space to make moving day a breeze. What made it stand out was its versatility. Farmers used it to get workers to the fields. Families used it for vacations. Businesses used it as delivery vans. It was as close to a Swiss Army knife on wheels as you could get in the 50s. The Travelall never sold in huge numbers, which is why it's largely forgotten today, but it deserves credit for pushing the multi-passenger SUV concept forward before most automakers even saw it coming. If you see one now, it's either at a classic truck show or rumbling down the road, owned by someone who refuses to let history die. 1954 Dodge Power Wagon Town Wagon. If the regular Dodge Power Wagon was the lumberjack of the truck world, the Town Wagon was the lumberjack who bought a decent shirt so he could come into town. Launched in 1954, this was Dodge's first real attempt at a people-hauling SUV, and it had the personality of a bulldozer with windows. The Power Wagon was already famous for its military roots, but the Town Wagon gave it a more civilized face. Think of it as taking a war veteran and giving him a haircut, but not bothering to hide the battle scars. It had the same rugged ladder frame, solid axles, and 4-wheel drive system as its work truck sibling, but with a fully enclosed steel body and seating for a small crowd. Under the hood, you got a flathead 6-cylinder engine, typically the 230 cubic inch L-head that made around 100 horsepower. It was slow, sure, but it could tow just about anything and keep going when the road turned into a mud pit. This thing was built to get families and gear to places where pavement didn't exist. Inside, Comfort was a relative term. The seats were basic, the floor was metal, and luxury features were non-existent. But you had headroom for days, huge windows for visibility, and enough cargo space to carry a week's worth of supplies. The town wagon never sold in huge numbers because it was overbuilt for most suburban buyers of the era, but for ranchers, hunters, and anyone living way off the grid, it was a game changer. In many ways, it was Dodge's forgotten ancestor to modern full-size SUVs. It may not have been pretty, but when you needed a vehicle that could take a beating and still get you home, the town wagon was the one to beat. 1955 Gaz M72. Now we're heading far from American shores to the Soviet Union, where the Gaz M72 quietly became one of the earliest crossovers, long before that word even existed. Built from 1955 to 1958, it was basically a mashup of a Gaz M20 Pobeda sedan and the rugged four-wheel drive system from the Gaz 69 military Jeep. Why did it exist? Simple. Soviet roads in the 50s were often little more than muddy tracks. The government needed something that could handle rural terrain but didn't look like a military truck. The result was the M72, a strange but brilliant mix of comfort and capability. It had a 2.1-liter inline-4 engine making about 55 horsepower, which wasn't fast, but the gearing made it a surprisingly competent off-roader. Permanent four-wheel drive and locking differentials meant it could crawl through deep snow or mud while still looking like a respectable sedan. The body looked almost identical to the Pobeda car, complete with smooth curves and a formal grille, but underneath it was all business, reinforced chassis, higher ground clearance, and big off-road tires. It was a wolf in sedan's clothing. The M72 was never built in huge numbers, which is why even many classic car fans have never heard of it. But in Russia, it holds a special place as one of the country's first civilian vehicles capable of true off-road travel. You could drive it to the opera or to a logging camp and it wouldn't flinch. This oddball sedan SUV hybrid was decades ahead of its time. In many ways, it predicted the modern crossover long before any automaker dared to admit people wanted both comfort and dirt road toughness in the same package. 1956 Austin Gypsy. When you think of rugged British off-roaders, Land Rover usually steals the spotlight. But in 1956, Austin decided to jump into the game with its own challenger, the Austin Gypsy. And yes, it was spelled with an S, which was one of the few soft things about it. The Gypsy was meant to be a direct competitor to the Land Rover Series Dawn, but Austin gave it a few tricks to stand out. The most notable was its all-steel body, unlike the aluminum Land Rover. That made it tougher in some ways, but also more prone to rust. British weather wasn't exactly kind to bare steel. Under the hood, you typically found a 2.2-liter petrol engine, though a diesel option came later. Four-wheel drive was standard, and its suspension used torsion bars instead of leaf springs, giving it a slightly smoother ride over rough ground. The Gypsy came in multiple wheelbase lengths and body styles, from soft-top open models to hardtops, and even utility versions. It was used by farmers, military units, and utility companies that needed a vehicle to slog through fields, forests, and flooded roads. Unfortunately, the Gypsy never truly beat Land Rover at its own game. By the late 60s, Austin had merged into British Leyland, and the Gypsy's days were numbered. Production ended in 1968, leaving it as a fascinating footnote in 4R4 history. Today, it's a rare sight, even in the UK, where most rusted away or were retired after hard use. But for collectors, finding a solid Austin Gypsy is like stumbling onto buried treasure. It's proof that Land Rover didn't have the field all to itself in the early days of the SUV race. 1956 Nissan Patrol 4W60. Before the Nissan Patrol became the global off-road legend it is today, it started humbly in 1951. But by 1956, the updated 4W60 version hit the scene, marking the Patrol's first serious push into civilian markets. This was Japan's answer to the Jeep and Land Cruiser, and it had the grit to back it up. The 4W60 looked rugged right out of the gate, flat fenders, upright grille, and a stance that said, "Point me at a mountain." Power came from a 3.7-liter inline-6 engine, producing about 85 horsepower, which was plenty for its intended role. It could tackle rocky trails, river crossings, and steep inclines without complaint. What made the Patrol stand out was its focus on reliability. It wasn't the fastest or most luxurious, but it was dependable in brutal conditions. Early patrols were used by police, the military, and exploration teams across Asia and the Middle East. They quickly earned a reputation for being almost impossible to kill. Inside, you got bare-bones practicality, simple bench seats, basic gauges, and very little in the way of creature comforts. But the Patrol's buyers weren't looking for comfort. They wanted a workhorse that could handle the kind of terrain most vehicles wouldn't even attempt. By the 60s, the Patrol began making its way into export markets, laying the foundation for its eventual success in Australia, the Middle East, and beyond. The 4W60 may not be widely remembered today, but it was the start of a dynasty that's still going strong decades later. 1957 Ford Bronco wagon prototype. Most people think the Ford Bronco debuted in 1966, but the truth is, Ford was experimenting with SUV concepts nearly a decade earlier. The 1957 Ford Bronco wagon prototype was one of those experiments, a strange, forward-thinking design that hinted at what was to come. This prototype was built on a shortened Ford pickup chassis, but featured a fully enclosed wagon body with off-road capability in mind. It looked like a mix between a station wagon and a Jeep with high ground clearance, a squared-off roofline, and chunky tires. Ford never mass-produced it, which is why almost no one outside hardcore automotive historians even knows it existed. But the Bronco wagon prototype proved Ford was paying attention to the growing demand for versatile, off-road capable family vehicles. Under the hood, it likely shared engines with Ford's small trucks of the era, meaning straight 6 power and plenty of low-end torque for pulling and climbing. The interior was pure utility, vinyl seats, simple dash, and removable rear benches to increase cargo space. Why didn't it go into production? Timing. The market wasn't quite ready, and Ford focused on trucks and sedans instead. But the idea stuck around, and by the mid-60s, the Bronco name returned, this time for real. In a way, this forgotten prototype is like the missing link in Ford's SUV evolution. It bridged the gap between the post-war work trucks and the lifestyle-oriented off-roaders that would dominate later decades. Spotting one today is nearly impossible, but its DNA lives on in every Bronco that followed. 1958 Mitsubishi Jeep J-Series. Some people forget that Mitsubishi once built Jeeps, real Jeeps. In 1953, Mitsubishi got a license from Willys to build them for the Japanese market, and by 1958, the J-Series was born. These weren't knockoffs, they were legitimate, locally built versions of the classic CJ, adapted to Japan's unique needs. The J-Series looked nearly identical to the American original. Flat fenders, vertical grille, and a stance that screamed military toughness. But Mitsubishi made subtle tweaks, including right-hand drive, different engines, and local manufacturing to handle Japan's rough, narrow roads. Early models ran on a 2.2-liter 4-cylinder petrol engine, but diesel versions came later, making them even more appealing for utility work. They were favorites of Japan's self-defense forces, police units, and rural municipalities that needed reliable, go-anywhere transport. Inside, you got exactly what you expected: bare-bones seating, simple gauges, and zero frills. But these Jeeps weren't meant to coddle you. They were tools, built for climbing mountains, crossing rivers, and crawling through snowdrifts without drama. The J-Series stayed in production for decades, well into the 1990s, making it one of the longest-running licensed Jeep programs in the world. But that first 1958 version, that was the start of Mitsubishi's off-road legacy, a time when SUV meant survival first and comfort later. 1959 Datsun Patrol 60. Before Nissan became a household name in the SUV world, there was Datsun, and in 1959, the Patrol 60 quietly entered the game. This was Japan's other answer to the Toyota Land Cruiser, and it was every bit as determined to prove itself. The Patrol 60 had a no-nonsense upright body, a wide stance, and a front end that looked like it could push through a brick wall. Under the hood sat a 3.9-liter inline-6 that made about 125 horsepower, plenty for serious off-road work in the late 50s. Four-wheel drive was standard, along with a 2-speed transfer case that let it crawl up steep grades or blast through sand with confidence. It quickly became a favorite in export markets like Australia and the Middle East, where durability mattered more than brand recognition. Inside, comfort was minimal, but visibility was excellent thanks to big, flat windows. The Patrol could be had as a short wheelbase, long wheelbase, or even troop carrier variant, making it incredibly versatile. While it never outsold the Land Cruiser globally, the Patrol 60 proved that Datsun and later Nissan could build a 4x4 that could take a beating and keep going. Today, it's a rare sight, but spotting one in the wild is like finding a living fossil from the dawn of the Japanese SUV era. 1961 International Scout 80. The International Scout 80 didn't just enter the SUV market, it helped invent it. When it debuted in 1961, the only real competitors were military-inspired Jeeps. The Scout 80, however, offered a civilian-friendly package that still had off-road chops. It had a boxy, upright shape with a removable hardtop, giving it a unique mix of practicality and adventure. The front end featured simple round headlights and a wide grille that gave it a friendly, approachable look, something Jeeps of the time lacked. Power came from a 2.5-liter inline-4 called the Comanche, making around 93 horsepower. It wasn't fast, but it was rugged and paired perfectly with its four-wheel drive system. The Scout 80 could go from city streets to muddy trails without breaking a sweat. Inside, it was Spartan, vinyl seats, minimal gauges, and not much else. But the Scout's charm came from its adaptability. Buyers could customize it with half cabs, full cabs, or soft tops. Farmers loved it, hunters loved it, and weekend adventurers loved it. The Scout 80's success proved there was a demand for small, versatile off-roaders that didn't feel like military surplus. In many ways, it was the spiritual grandfather of the modern SUV, showing that rugged didn't have to mean uncomfortable. 1963 Jeep Wagoneer SJ. When the Jeep Wagoneer debuted in 1963, it was like seeing a cowboy wearing a tuxedo. It still knew how to ride the range, but it cleaned up nice for the city. The Wagoneer was one of the first SUVs to blend genuine off-road capability with everyday comfort. It had clean, almost car-like styling, a spacious interior, and a ride that didn't leave you feeling like you'd been on a bucking Bronco all day. Under the hood, you could choose from a range of engines, including a 230 cubic inch Tornado overhead cam 6, which was pretty advanced for the time. Four-wheel drive was available, and the Wagoneer could handle trails, snow, and sand just as well as any Jeep CJ, but with a lot more room for passengers and luggage. Inside, you got amenities unheard of in off-road vehicles of the era. Plush seating, optional air conditioning, and even automatic transmissions. The Wagoneer was aimed at families who wanted adventure without sacrificing comfort. This blend of refinement and capability made the Wagoneer a pioneer. It essentially invented the luxury SUV category decades before that term even existed. Without it, the high-end 4x4 market might have looked very different. 1966 Ford Bronco U13 Roadster. The first-generation Ford Bronco is an icon, but the rare U13 Roadster version from 1966 takes the crown for being one of the most unusual and collectible SUVs ever made. The U13 was the most stripped-down Bronco you could buy. No doors, no roof, no side windows, just a basic tub on wheels with a windshield. It was designed for warm weather work and play, like beach patrols, ranch duty, or simply cruising around sunny towns. Power came from a 170 cubic inch inline-6, making 105 horsepower, with a 3-speed manual transmission and part-time four-wheel drive. It could handle trails and dunes, but it wasn't about long-distance comfort. Inside, you got, well, almost nothing. Vinyl bucket seats, a simple metal dash, and exposed floor panels. The lack of doors made it feel like a big toy, but that also meant you could hop in and out without hassle. Ford only built about 4,000 Roadsters in the first few years, making them incredibly rare today. Most were used hard and didn't survive, which is why collectors go wild for the few remaining examples. The U13 Roadster is living proof that sometimes less really is more, especially when it comes to pure, open-air SUV fun. So there you have it, 15 of the oldest SUVs you probably never knew existed, each one shaping the road for the off-roaders we see today. From Soviet sedan 4x4 hybrids to stripped-down American roadsters, these machines weren't just vehicles, they were statements. Which one surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories from the hidden corners of automotive history. Who knows? The next forgotten legend might be parked in your neighbor's garage.